I got a call from a neighbor. Your family is having a huge party at your house. When I arrived, I saw a banner that said Freedom Day. They were celebrating getting rid of me. I smiled, knocked on the door, and when my son opened it with champagne in hand, two officers stepped forward and said something that wiped the smile off his face. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The phone rang at 8:47. I know the time because I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counter and was looking at the clock, thinking about the 10 minutes of quiet I had earned before bed. The sound was an intrusion. In my new apartment, the phone rarely rang. I picked it up, my hand still damp from the cloth. Eleanor? The voice was low, urgent. It was Gladys from across the street, my old street. Gladys, is everything all right? I asked. My first thought was of a medical emergency. She was not a woman given to casual calls. Eleanor, dear, she said, and her tone was one of strained calm. You need to come to your house, now. I sat down on the stool by the counter. The laminate felt cool through my slacks. My house? Why? What's happening? There's a party. She paused. I heard her draw a careful breath. A rather large one. Cars have been arriving for an hour. There's music. They've strung lights on the porch. I blinked. The image would not form. My house, the 2-story colonial on Maple Drive, was empty. Malcolm had the keys, but he was supposed to be at his friend's place in the city. I had moved my essentials out 2 weeks prior, needing air that wasn't thick with resentment. The house was in my name. The mortgage was paid by my checks. It was to be sold, the proceeds divided as part of a slow, careful separation I was attempting to engineer. A party made no sense. A party? Who is it? My voice sounded distant, even to me. It's your family, Eleanor. Her words were precise, clipped. I saw Malcolm carrying in cases of beer. Lisa arrived with platters of food from that expensive caterer downtown. Your brother Robert is here. Several of your nieces and cousins. Their cars fill the driveway and line the curb. A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. But why? It was a foolish question. The answer was forming in the chill spreading from my core. There's a banner, Gladys said, her voice dropping further, as if someone might overhear. It's hanging between the 2 front columns under the porch light. It says Freedom Day. The words hung in the silent air of my tidy kitchen. Freedom Day. I repeated them in my mind. They were just words, but combined with the image of my family, my belongings, my space, they ceased to be just words. They became a declaration, an indictment, a celebration. Of what? Of my absence, of my perceived removal. The chill solidified into a hard, heavy weight in my chest. I see, I said. My voice was flat. I was surprised by its steadiness. I took pictures, Gladys continued, pragmatic, through my front window. The zoom isn't perfect, but it's clear enough. I can show you. I think you should see. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. I did not ask any more questions. I did not exclaim. The facts were being presented to me, one by one, like pieces of evidence laid on a table. Park on Cypress Lane around the corner, she instructed. Don't drive past the house. Come to my front door. I'll be watching. I agreed and ended the call. The silence of the apartment rushed back in, but it was different now. It was no longer peaceful. It was hollow. I looked around. The single plate and cup in the drying rack. The new, small sofa. The bare walls. This was my refuge, my strategic retreat. I had thought I was managing the situation. I had thought I was in control of the unraveling. I stood up. My movements were automatic. I went to the bedroom, exchanged my slippers for shoes. I took my purse, my keys, my coat hung by the door. I put it on. Each action was simple, deliberate. Inside, the cold weight was turning, revealing sharp edges. But my hands were steady. The drive was a series of familiar turns, made strange by context. I did not play the radio. I watched the streetlights pass, their rhythm a silent countdown. I parked on Cypress, as Gladys had said. The night air was crisp. I walked the short block to Maple Drive, but from the opposite direction, approaching Gladys's house from the side. I did not look toward my own home until I was on her porch. Then I turned. The sight was a physical blow. Every window blazed with light. Shadows of people moved behind the blinds in my living room. The porch was indeed strung with lines of cheap party bulbs, and there, bold white letters on a dark blue background hung the banner, Freedom Day. It fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. Music, a heavy bass pulse, thudded through the closed windows of my home. I saw figures on the back deck through the slats of the fence. Laughter carried down the street. I stood there watching a celebration in my own home to which I was not invited, which was explicitly about my not being there. The evidence was irrefutable. Gladys's front door opened with a soft click. She stood there, a small, slender woman with sharp eyes. She held her phone. She didn't speak, just motioned me inside. Her living room was as I remembered, orderly, floral, smelling of lemon polish. She led me to her armchair by the front window, which had a direct view. She handed me her phone. The screen showed a photograph. It was grainy, taken through glass at a distance, but clear enough. My front door was open. Malcolm stood there, a bottle in his hand, laughing. He was wearing a shirt I had given him for his last birthday. Behind him, in my foyer, I could see a crowd. Another photo. Lisa was arranging catered trays on my dining room table, the one that had been my mother's. Another, my good crystal punch bowl was filled with a red liquid. Another, a young man I didn't know was sitting on the arm of my reading chair, his feet on the ottoman. I swiped through them. Each one was a tile in a mosaic of betrayal. There was no ambiguity. This was not a simple gathering. The banner defined it. This was an event. I handed the phone back to her. "Thank you, Gladys." "What will you do?" she asked. Her gaze was direct, without pity. It held a kind of fierce expectation. I looked out the window again. I watched the comings and goings on my porch. I saw my nephew, barely 18, stumble out with a beer in his hand. I saw my sister-in-law Lisa throw her head back in a laugh, her hand on my door frame. They were all so comfortable. They had taken my domain and made it their own the moment I stepped away. The cold, hard thing inside me finished its turn. Its edges were now aligned. It was no longer just hurt. It was a plan. It was resolve. "I am going to end their party," I said. My voice was still quiet, but it had a new quality, a finality. But not tonight. Tonight I gather information. Tomorrow I take action. Gladys nodded once. "What do you need?" "Those pictures. Can you send them to me?" "Of course. And your statement. What you saw and heard, written down, dated." "Consider it done." I took one last long look at the illuminated house. The banner seemed to glow under the porch light. Freedom Day. They had named their betrayal. They had thrown themselves a party to commemorate my excision from their lives. A profound sadness welled up, but it was instantly encased in that new, solid resolve. They had made it a matter of public record. I would treat it as such. I turned from the window. "I'll go now. I have things to prepare." Gladys walked me to the door. As I stepped out onto her porch, she touched my arm lightly. "Eleanor, I'm sorry." I met her eyes. "So am I said. And I was. I was sorry for the woman who had believed that endless giving would earn lasting love. I was sorry for the boy who had grown into a man who would do this. But I was not sorry for what I knew I had to do next. That felt like the first clean breath I had taken in years. I walked back to my car without looking back. The thudding music faded behind me. In the quiet of the driver's seat, I sat for a full minute, hands on the wheel. Then I started the engine and drove back to my small, silent apartment. The next phase had already begun. The silence of my apartment was no longer empty. It was a workspace. I placed my purse on the counter and took out my phone. The pictures from Gladys had arrived. I opened them, examining each one with a detached focus. I noted the faces, the food on my table, the banner. I saved them to a separate folder. Then I opened a word processor and began to type a concise timeline of events, from Gladys's call to my observation. I printed 2 copies. My next task was the document box. I kept it on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. I carried it to the kitchen table. Inside, files were arranged by category: taxes, insurance, automobile. I found the one labeled house. I removed the deed first. The paper was crisp, bearing my name alone: Eleanor Marie Richards. I had refinanced after the divorce, a process of long nights and a second job that had left me perpetually tired. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of that history, then set it aside. I found the homeowner's insurance policy and the most recent property tax receipt, proof of sole ownership and financial responsibility. I assembled a packet: the deed on top, then the tax receipt, then the printed timeline, followed by the clearest of Gladys's photos, which I had printed on plain paper. I paper-clipped them together. I placed the packet into a simple manila folder. The action felt administrative, which was calming. Sleep was not a consideration. I changed into a pair of navy trousers and a cream-colored blouse, clothes that communicated seriousness, not agitation. I made a pot of strong tea and drank a cup while reviewing my folder one more time. At 7:30 in the morning, I drove to the local police precinct. The station lobby was a study in beige and muted noise. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. A tired-looking woman argued softly with an officer behind a plexiglass window about a parking ticket. I took a number and waited on a hard plastic chair. When my number was called, I approached the window. The officer there was a man in his 50s with a close-cropped gray beard and eyes that had seen too many early mornings. His nameplate read Jenkins. "How can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice neutral. "I need to report a crime in progress," I said. My voice was level. I opened the manila folder and slid the deed under the gap in the glass. "This is my house at 2147 Maple Drive. Last night and into the early morning, it was occupied without my knowledge or consent by a large group of individuals. They are still there. I have evidence of trespassing and unlawful occupation." Officer Jenkins' eyebrows lifted slightly. He picked up the deed, his eyes scanning it. "This is your property?" "Yes, solely. I have the tax records here as well. I moved out temporarily 2 weeks ago. My adult son had a key for necessary access. He has used that access to host what appears to be a celebratory party with numerous guests. They have caused property damage based on photographic evidence and are consuming goods on the premises. I want them removed." He studied me for a moment, then looked back at the deed. "Your son, you said?" "Yes, Malcolm Richards. He is 22. Other family members are present, including my sister-in-law, Lisa Hammond. But the guest list includes many individuals I do not know. It is a trespassing situation." I slid the printed photos and the timeline under the glass. He examined them silently. The image of the Freedom Day banner made his mouth tighten almost imperceptibly. "You saw this yourself?" he asked, tapping the banner photo. "Last night, at approximately 9:15, my neighbor, Mrs. Gladys Arnold of 2148 Maple Drive, alerted me. She provided these photographs from her residence across the street. She is prepared to give a written and verbal statement. She observed the party's commencement and can identify several attendees." He leaned back in his chair, the photos in his hand. "Ma'am, this is a domestic situation. Often, we're called to things like this, and it turns into a he said, she said. Families have disputes." I met his gaze. "I understand that perception, Officer Jenkins. This is not a dispute about a loud stereo or an argument. This is the illegal occupation of my real property. They are not tenants. They have no lease. I did not grant permission for this event. The banner indicates a deliberate, malicious intent to celebrate my exclusion from my own home. I am not here to argue. I am here to file a formal complaint of criminal trespass and to request that officers accompany me to the address to order the unauthorized persons to leave. If they refuse, I will press charges." My tone was calm, procedural. I was stating facts, not pleading a case. I saw his initial reluctance shift. He was a man who dealt in rules. I was presenting him with a clear violation. "You want to go over there now? With us?" "Yes. I believe a police presence is necessary for a peaceful and lawful resolution. I do not wish to engage in a physical or verbal confrontation. I wish for the law to be applied." He nodded slowly. "All right. Give me a few minutes to review this and type up the report. Have a seat, Ms. Richards." I returned to the plastic chair. The woman with the parking ticket was gone. The low hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound. I kept my back straight, my hands folded over the manila folder in my lap. I did not fidget. I projected stillness. After 20 minutes, Officer Jenkins emerged from a side door with a younger officer in uniform. "Ms. Richards, this is Officer Ruiz. We'll take your statement formally now, and then we can proceed." I followed them into a small, windowless interview room. I repeated the facts, referring to my timeline. Officer Ruiz typed on a laptop. Officer Jenkins asked clarifying questions. "And you have no agreement, written or verbal, allowing your son to live there or host gatherings?" "None. He has his own apartment in the city. His presence in the house was to be for retrieving personal items only. And the purpose of this Freedom Day? I can only infer from the term and the context that it celebrates my removal from the family dynamic. It is a personal matter. The criminal matter is the unauthorized use of the premises." Officer Jenkins almost smiled, a grim, understanding smile. "Okay, we'll file the report. We'll accompany you to the property. Our role will be to keep the peace and inform the occupants that they are trespassing and must leave at the request of the legal owner. If they refuse, we can place them under arrest. Do you understand?" "I do." "We'll follow you in a squad car. Park behind us when we arrive." I signed the printed statement. The paperwork was complete. The mechanism of the law was now engaged. As I walked back to my car, the morning sun was bright and cold. The folder was in my passenger seat. I started the engine and watched in the rearview mirror as the black and white police car pulled out behind me. There was no turning back. The storm I had gathered on my kitchen table was now moving toward the shore. I felt a profound clarity. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was a matter of law, of property, of consequence. I put the car in drive and led the way to Maple Drive. I turned onto Maple Drive with the squad car close behind me. The street was quiet in the mid-morning light, a normal suburban Saturday, except for my house. Even from the end of the block, I could see the detritus. Red plastic cups littered the lawn. One of my patio chairs was tipped over on the walkway. The banner still hung, a cruel flag in the mild breeze. The music was off, but the evidence of the night was stamped across the property. Officer Jenkins had instructed me to park behind them, several houses down. I pulled my car to the curb and watched in the mirror as the black and white parked ahead of me. Both officers got out. I took a breath, collected my folder, and joined them on the sidewalk. "We'll approach and make contact," Officer Jenkins said, his voice low. "You should stay back until we've assessed the situation." I nodded. "I would like to observe from the perimeter first, to confirm the ongoing trespass and to identify any specific damages before they have a chance to conceal them." He looked at me, a flicker of what might have been respect in his eyes. "All right, but stay on the public sidewalk. Do not enter the property until we give the all clear. Understood?" Understood. The two officers began a slow walk toward the house, their posture alert but not aggressive. I followed at a distance, maintaining the gap. My heart was a steady, hard drum in my chest, but my hands were cold and still. This was a survey, a final reconnaissance. As I drew closer, details emerged. The porch was a mess. bottles, plates with congealed food, a sweater I didn't recognize draped over the railing. The front door was closed, but the living room blinds were open. I could see movement inside. Someone was walking through carrying a trash bag. I stopped directly across the street near the trunk of a large oak tree. From here, I had a clear view. Officer Jenkins and Officer Ruiz stepped onto the lawn. They did not approach the door immediately. They were observing just as I was. The smell hit me then, carried on a shift of the wind, the sour tang of spilled beer, the greasy remnant of grilled meat, and underneath it the familiar scent of my own home, lemony polish, the particular smell of the old books in the study, now corrupted, drowned out by the party. I saw my brother Robert walk past the front window. He was carrying 2 coffee mugs. He looked rumpled, tired, but he was smiling at someone I couldn't see. He was comfortable. He was making himself at home. A sharp pang, old and deep, lanced through the cold focus. This was the man I had helped through his divorce, whose kids I had watched every other weekend for a year. He was drinking coffee in my house on the morning of my humiliation. Then Malcolm appeared. He came out the front door wearing the same clothes from Gladys's photo. He stretched, ran a hand through his hair, and looked out at the morning with a satisfied expression. He didn't see the officers standing on the grass near the rose bushes. He didn't see me. He lit a cigarette and flicked the match into my hydrangea bed. He leaned against the door jamb, master of all he surveyed. That sight, the casual ownership in his posture, extinguished the last flicker of sentimental pain. What remained was a clear, cold ledger. I had raised him in that house. I had paid for its silence and stability while working overtime. I had listened to his problems in that living room. And now he stood there, celebrating his liberation from me, surrounded by the physical proof of my life's work. Officer Jenkins chose that moment to step forward. "Good morning," he called out, his voice carrying across the quiet lawn. Malcolm started, turned, and the cigarette dangled from his lips. His expression shifted from sleepy contentment to confusion, then to a defensive smirk. "Morning, officers. Everything all right?" "We're here regarding a trespassing complaint," Officer Jenkins said, his tone official. "Are you the resident here?" Malcolm puffed his chest out slightly. "Yeah, it's my family's house. What's this about?" "Who is the legal owner of the property?" Malcolm hesitated. "My mother, but she's not here. We're just having a family thing." "Is the owner, Eleanor Richards, present and aware of this gathering?" "She knows we're here," Malcolm said, but his voice lost some certainty. He looked past the officers, his eyes scanning the street. They passed over my position by the tree without registering me. I was part of the scenery. "We have spoken with Miss Richards," Officer Ruiz stated. "She has filed a formal complaint. She is present to enforce her property rights." Malcolm's smirk vanished. His eyes widened, then narrowed. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it on the porch step. "She's here? Where?" I did not move. I let him search, let the uncertainty crawl into his voice. This was the first taste, the first crack in his fantasy of consequence-free rebellion. Officer Jenkins ignored his question. "How many people are currently inside the residence?" "I don't know. A few. Look, this is a misunderstanding. She's overreacting." From my vantage point, I saw Lisa's face appear in the window beside the door. Her eyes were panicked. She disappeared. A moment later, the front door opened wider and my brother Robert stepped out, his coffee mug still in hand. "What's going on, Mal?" he asked, then saw the officers. "Oh, hello. We are informing you that you are all trespassing on private property," Officer Jenkins said, his voice rising to address both men and anyone inside. "The owner has not granted permission for you to be here. You are ordered to vacate the premises immediately." Robert's face flushed. "Trespassing? This is my sister's house. This is family." "The complaint is filed and documented," Officer Ruiz said. "You have no legal right to occupy this property. You will gather your personal belongings and leave now, or you will be placed under arrest. The words under arrest hung in the air. They were no longer an abstract concept. They were a procedural fact delivered by men in uniform. Robert stared, speechless. Malcolm looked from one officer to the other, his bravado crumbling into stunned disbelief. It was time. I stepped out from the shadow of the tree and began walking across the street. My shoes made a soft, precise sound on the asphalt. All three men turned to look at me. Malcolm's face went pale. Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I walked past the officers onto the edge of the lawn. I stopped. I did not look at the mess. I looked only at my son and my brother. I held the manila folder against my chest. "The officers are correct," I said. My voice was clear, carrying in the quiet street. "You are trespassing. You will all leave now." I did not wait for their reaction. I turned to Officer Jenkins and gave a small, decisive nod. The survey was over. The confrontation had begun. My words hung in the air between us, a formal decree. Malcolm's eyes were wide, fixed on me with a mixture of shock and betrayal that, under any other circumstances, might have broken me. Robert spluttered, "Eleanor, for God's sake, what is this?" I did not answer him. I held Malcolm's gaze for a 3 count, then turned my attention to Officer Jenkins. The front door is the primary point of entry. The occupants are all inside or on the premises. Malcolm, recovering some of his defiance, took a step backward toward the open door. "You can't be serious. You called the cops on your own family?" His voice was loud, meant to carry, to summon witnesses. "I am enforcing my legal rights," I stated, my voice calm. "The conversation is over. The officers will now secure the property." As if on cue, a face appeared at the living room window. A young woman I didn't know, her expression curious. Then another. The party was waking up. Malcolm saw them too, and a bit of his bravado returned. He turned and strode back into the house, letting the screen door slam shut behind him. He clearly thought the walls offered some form of sanctuary, that this was still a domestic squabble and not a legal procedure. Officer Jenkins looked at me. "Ma'am, we need to address everyone at once. We'll need to enter to clear the house." "I understand. I will knock." I walked up the path, past the overturned chair, stepping over a discarded plate. The officers followed a few paces behind. The Freedom Day banner flapped gently above my head. I reached the porch, my feet on the familiar wood. I did not pause. I raised my hand and knocked on my own front door, 3 firm, measured raps. There was a muffled commotion from inside, voices, a shushing sound. Then the door was pulled open. It was not Malcolm, but Lisa. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. She wore one of my good linen aprons over her clothes. "Eleanor!" she exclaimed, her voice an artificial blend of warmth and surprise. What a surprise! We were just cleaning up from last night. A little get-together for Malcolm. You should have come. I looked past her. The foyer was a disaster. Coat piles on the stairs, a dark red stain on the runner. Beyond, in the living room, a cluster of sleepy, confused faces stared back at me. I saw cousins, nephews, strangers. I saw Malcolm standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, trying to look in control. I did not respond to Lisa. I did not move. I simply took one precise step to my right, clearing the doorway. Officer Jenkins stepped into the space I had vacated. Officer Ruiz moved to stand beside him. The effect was instantaneous. Lisa's false smile vanished. Her eyes darted from the officers to me and back again. The chatter in the living room died. "Good morning," Officer Jenkins announced, his voice filling the silent house. "I am Officer Jenkins. This is Officer Ruiz. We are here at the request of the legal property owner, Eleanor Richards. You are all currently trespassing. This gathering is unlawful. The party is over. You will gather your personal belongings immediately and vacate the premises." A beat of stunned silence was followed by a surge of noise. Trespassing? What does that mean? "Aunt Eleanor, what's going on?" Malcolm pushed his way forward. "This is my house," he yelled, his voice cracking. "She's my mother. She gave me a key." Officer Ruiz turned to him. Having a key does not grant you ownership or the right to host unauthorized events. Your mother has filed a formal complaint. You are not a tenant. You are a guest who has overstayed his welcome. The welcome has been officially revoked. You can't do this, Lisa shrieked, finding her voice. It was a sharp, piercing sound. She pointed a finger at me. She's doing this to be cruel, to ruin a nice thing. We're family. This is a family home. The law does not make an exception for family, Officer Jenkins said, his tone weary but firm. He'd heard this before. The owner's wishes are clear. Now, we can do this orderly or we can do it with handcuffs. Your choice. But everyone leaves. Now. I watched the chaos unfold from my place on the porch, just outside the door. I was a spectator to the unraveling of their celebration. The sleepy guests were now scrambling, looking for purses, jackets, shoes. My nephew Darren stared at me with open-mouthed confusion. A young man I'd never seen before was frantically collecting beer cans, as if cleaning up would change the situation. Malcolm's face was a storm of emotions, rage, humiliation, a dawning fear. He took a step toward me. "Mom, please, talk to me, just send them away and we'll talk." I looked at him. My son. The boy I'd read to on the stairs behind him. The young man I'd consoled after his first heartbreak in the living room to our left. The adult who had hung a banner declaring his freedom from me. "There is nothing to discuss," I said. My voice was low but carried. "You have 20 minutes to remove your personal items from your old room. After that, anything left will be considered abandoned property. The officers will supervise." His face crumpled, not into tears, but into a mask of pure, impotent fury. "You're kicking me out of my own home?" "It is not your home," I corrected him, each word deliberate. "It is my house. You made the choice to treat it as a party venue for strangers. You do not get to claim sanctuary in it now. 20 minutes, Malcolm. The clock starts now." I turned slightly, acknowledging Officer Jenkins. "Officer, may I enter to supervise the removal of my personal heirlooms? I need to ensure nothing is taken." "Of course, Ms. Richards. We'll accompany you." I stepped across the threshold into my own house. The air was thick with the smells of the night before: sweat, alcohol, cheap perfume. I walked past Lisa, who was frozen, still clutching my apron. I walked past my brother Robert, who simply shook his head at me, a wordless judgment. I ignored them all. My focus was on the tangible, the material things that represented my actual history, not their distorted narrative. The real work of reclamation was beginning. The living room was a ruin of the night's excess. I registered the details without allowing them to settle into me. The antique coffee table bore a network of white rings from wet glasses. The cream-colored sofa cushions were stained and misplaced. Empty bottles and plates covered every surface. Officer Jenkins raised his voice again, addressing the dozen or so people still gawking in the space. "Listen up! The owner is here to secure her property. This is no longer a social call. You will take only what you brought. Any attempt to remove items belonging to the homeowner will be considered theft. Move quickly and calmly to the exit." A young woman, a friend of Malcolm's I vaguely recognized, had the presence of mind to look ashamed. She hurried to a corner, collected a small purse and a jacket, and made for the door without looking at anyone. Her movement broke the paralysis. Others began to shuffle, grabbing phones from chargers, searching for shoes under furniture. Lisa, however, remained rooted, the apron still tied around her waist. Her shock was hardening into fury. "You're letting her do this?" she demanded of Officer Ruiz. "She's punishing us because she's miserable. She's always been like this, controlling everything, sucking the joy out of every room." I ignored her. I walked to the dining room archway. My grandmother's cherrywood sideboard was against the wall. On its polished surface, caterers' chafing dishes sat, still holding the congealed remains of meat and pasta. I opened the top drawer. The silverware, my mother's wedding silver, was still there, untouched. I closed the drawer. She worked 2 jobs to keep this house. Lisa's voice followed me, shrill and desperate, and she never let us forget it. Every holiday, every visit, it was a debt we had to pay with our gratitude. Well, we're free of that now, free of her. Her words were meant to wound, to justify the banner, to rally the others. I felt them like darts against a stone wall. They registered, but did not penetrate. I turned to face her. Officer Ruiz had taken a step closer to her, a subtle warning. "You are free to leave, Lisa," I said, my tone even. "That is the only freedom being offered here today. Take off my apron and go." Her face contorted. She ripped the apron ties and threw the linen garment onto the filthy floor. "You'll regret this. You'll be alone. You think anyone will side with you after this stunt?" "Mom, stop!" Malcolm's voice cut through. He was pulling at her arm, his eyes wild. "Just stop talking." He understood, on some level, that every word she spoke was being witnessed by the police, etching their malice into the official record. My brother Robert finally moved. He walked up to me, his expression a mix of condescension and bewilderment. "Ellie, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. We'll clean everything up. We'll pay for any damage. Let's just calm down and be adults." I looked at him. "You are trespassing in my home, Robert. You are not in a position to negotiate terms. Gather your wife and leave." He flinched at the use of his full name. I hadn't called him Robert in years. It was always Rob. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked past me at the officers, at the retreating guests, at his son's panicked face. The reality of the situation, the unyielding legal framework of it, finally seemed to reach him. He wasn't dealing with his emotional sister. He was dealing with a complainant. He turned and walked stiffly toward the kitchen, calling for his wife. The exodus gained momentum. People filed out the front door, some avoiding my eyes, a few shooting me looks of pure resentment. I heard muttered phrases. "Crazy." "Called the cops on her own kid." "Never going to live this down." I let the words wash past. I focused on inventory. I moved to the study. My desk had been used as a bar. Bottles and sticky mixers covered the leather blotter. My degrees on the wall were askew. I straightened them. I checked the small locked cabinet where I kept important documents. It was still locked. Officer Jenkins approached me. "We'll need to do a walkthrough to ensure everyone is out. Do you want to accompany us?" "Yes," I said. We moved from room to room. The kitchen was a catastrophe of dirty dishes and overflowing trash. Upstairs, the guest bathroom was a mess. In Malcolm's old room, 2 young men were hastily shoving clothes into duffel bags. They startled when they saw the uniform. "Time's up," Officer Jenkins said. "Finish and leave. Now." We continued to the primary bedroom, my bedroom. The door was closed. I turned the knob and pushed it open. The room was untouched. The bed was made. My perfume bottles sat neatly on the dresser. They had not violated this space. I wasn't sure if it was a vestige of respect or simply because the party hadn't spread this far. The relief was small but tangible. Back downstairs, the house was emptying. The last of the strangers were gone. Only family remained in the foyer: Malcolm, Lisa, Robert, and his wife Carol, who was silently crying. Malcolm had a large black garbage bag in each hand, filled haphazardly with his things. "This is cruel," Carol whispered, not looking at me. "What's cruel," I said, "is a celebration of my exclusion from the home I provided. What's cruel is the theft of my peace. You are all witnesses to that cruelty. Now you are leaving its scene." Malcolm dropped the bags. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You have an apartment," I replied. "The one I co-signed for and pay half the rent on. That arrangement ends now. You will receive a formal notice. You have 30 days to assume the full lease or find other arrangements." The color drained from his face. The practical consequences, one after another, were landing with the force of physical blows. The apartment, the car insurance, the phone bill, all the invisible supports I provided were now being named and withdrawn. Officer Jenkins gestured toward the door. "All right, folks, this concludes the eviction. Ms. Richards, do you wish to press charges against any individuals at this time?" I looked at the small, shattered group that was my immediate family. Lisa stared at the floor, her defiance spent. Robert looked old and tired. Malcolm was shaking, whether from rage or fear I couldn't tell. "No," I said, "not at this time. They are leaving. That is the priority." "Understood. We'll wait until they're off the property." One by one, they filed out. Robert guided Carol. Lisa walked out alone, head high but steps unsteady. Malcolm was last. He hoisted his garbage bags and paused on the threshold. He looked back at me, his eyes searching for the mother he knew, the one who would relent. He found only the homeowner. He turned and walked out. Officer Ruiz followed them out, ensuring they went to their cars. Officer Jenkins remained with me. "We'll take a final look outside, then we'll be on our way. You have our report number. If they return, call 911 immediately." "Thank you, officer." He nodded and stepped outside. Through the open door, I saw Malcolm's car door slam shut. I saw Lisa arguing with Robert by their sedan. I saw the Freedom Day banner, forgotten, still hanging between the columns. I walked onto the porch. I reached up, found the knot securing one end of the banner, and pulled. The string snapped. The banner fluttered down in a heap of blue and white fabric at my feet. I picked it up, folded it once, and carried it back inside. I dropped it into the kitchen trash, on top of the empty bottles and discarded food. Then I closed the front door. The lock clicked into place. The house was full of silence and wreckage, but it was mine again. The click of the lock was a period at the end of a long, chaotic sentence. I stood with my back against the door, listening to the silence. It was not peaceful. It was the silence of aftermath, thick with the ghosts of laughter and the physical evidence of violation. The officer's car engine started outside and faded away. I was alone. The first task was assessment. I could not allow the scale of the mess to overwhelm me. I needed to document it. I took my phone from my purse and began to take pictures. I started in the foyer, the stained runner, the scuff marks on the wall where someone had stumbled. I moved to the living room, capturing the ring-stained table, the displaced furniture, the crushed cracker crumbs ground into the rug. I photographed the dining room sideboard with the caterer's dishes, the kitchen counters buried in filth. This was not for the police. This was for me, a record of what they had done. With the documentation complete, I began the triage. Some things required immediate attention to prevent permanent damage. I walked to my grandmother's sideboard. I carefully lifted the heavy chafing dishes, one by one, and carried them to the kitchen. I set them in the sink. Then I took a clean dish towel from a drawer. The drawer was sticky, but the towels inside were still clean and dampened it with warm water. I returned to the sideboard and gently wiped its surface, removing the spills and grease. The rich cherry wood gleamed beneath the film. I opened each drawer again, verifying the silver was all there. It was. Next, the coffee table. I gathered the bottles and glasses onto a tray. The white rings were etched into the lacquer. I knew a mixture of baking soda and toothpaste might lift them, but that was a task for later. For now, I cleared it. My movements were mechanical, efficient. I did not think about who had done this. I thought about the next step, the next object. I filled a garbage bag with disposable plates and cups. I collected the empty bottles into a cardboard box for recycling. The house began to smell less of party and more of lemon polish and trash. A knock at the door made me freeze. I looked through the peephole. It was Officer Ruiz. I unlocked and opened the door. "Ms. Richards, just wanted to let you know the family vehicles have left the area. Officer Jenkins is writing up the final report in the car. Is everything all right in here?" "Everything is under control," I said. "I am assessing the damage." He glanced past me at the filled trash bag. "Do you need any further assistance? Medical or—" "I do not. Thank you." He nodded. "We'll be on our way then. Remember to call if there's any issue." "I will." I closed the door again. As I turned back to the living room, another knock came, sharper this time. I returned to the peephole. Malcolm stood on the porch, alone. His hands were empty. He looked younger, deflated. I opened the door but left the screen door locked between us. "Your 20 minutes have passed," I said. "I know," he said, his voice husky. I need to get the rest of my stuff from the basement, the boxes of my childhood things, and my winter coats." I considered this. The items he mentioned were indeed his, stored out of necessity, not active use. Letting him retrieve them now would be more efficient than dealing with them later. "You have 10 minutes. You will go directly to the basement via the exterior bulkhead door. I will unlock it. You will not enter the main house. You will remove only the boxes labeled with your name and the garment bag. Is that clear?" He blinked, surprised by the specific instructions. "The bulkhead? Can't I just come through?" "No. You are not permitted in the main dwelling. Those are the terms. Accept them or leave." He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Fine, okay." I took my keys and walked through the kitchen to the back door. I unlocked it and stepped onto the deck. The backyard was littered with bottle caps and cigarette butts. I ignored them and went to the sloping wooden doors of the basement bulkhead. I unlocked the padlock and swung the doors open. The interior stairs led down into the cool, dim basement. 10 minutes, I called out to him. I stood to the side, near the kitchen door, where I could watch the bulkhead entrance but was not in his path. He appeared around the side of the house and, without looking at me, descended the stairs. I heard him moving boxes below. He emerged a few minutes later, dragging a plastic bin. He hauled it up the steps and onto the lawn. He went back down. He repeated this 3 times, finally bringing up a blue garment bag. He was sweating, his shirt sticking to his back. He stood by the pile of his belongings on the grass, looking lost. "How am I supposed to get these to my car?" "That is not my concern," I said. "Your time is up. You need to leave the property." He stared at me, a final desperate hope fading from his eyes. "You're really going to be like this? After everything?" "After everything," I repeated, the words flat and heavy. "Yes, goodbye, Malcolm." I turned and walked back into the kitchen. I locked the door. Through the window, I saw him pull out his phone, make a call. Eventually, Robert's sedan pulled up to the curb. Robert got out, his face like thunder. Together, without speaking, they loaded Malcolm's bins into the trunk and back seat. They drove away. I went to the bulkhead, closed and locked the doors. I returned to the living room. The silence was complete now. The immediate threats were gone. The salvage operation was over. What remained was the sheer, exhausting volume of cleanup. I looked at the stained sofa, the dirty floors, the overflowing trash. The adrenaline that had fueled me since Gladys's call began to recede, leaving a deep, hollow fatigue in its place. I sat down on the bottom step of the staircase, avoiding the stain on the runner. I put my face in my hands. I did not cry. I just breathed, in and out in the quiet, damaged heart of my reclaimed house. I sat on the step until the muscles in my legs began to stiffen. The fatigue was a physical weight, but the mess was a visual demand. I could not sleep here with the house in this state. I pushed myself up and went to the kitchen. The first necessity was a clear space to function. I filled the sink with hot, soapy water and began washing the dishes that were mine, the platters, the good glasses that had been used, the silverware. The mechanical action of scrubbing, rinsing, and drying was a mental anesthetic. I worked for an hour, restoring order to the kitchen. I wiped down every surface, throwing away contaminated food and emptying the trash. When the kitchen was clean, the rest of the house seemed less daunting. I moved to the living room. I vacuumed the rug, the roar of the machine filling the silence with a purpose. I used a specialized wood cleaner on the coffee table. The white rings faded to a faint haze. I would need to polish it later, but it was no longer an open wound. The physical labor prevented me from thinking. My mind was a blank slate focused on sequence: spray, wipe, lift, vacuum. I opened the windows to let the stale air escape. The afternoon light shifted across the floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the newly cleared spaces. I did not stop. As I was gathering the last of the bottle caps from the back deck, I saw a figure approaching from across the street. Gladys. She carried a small thermal bag. I watched her come up the walk, her steps careful. She had waited until the drama was over, until the police and the family were gone. She'd given me time. I appreciated that. I met her at the front door. She looked past me into the living room. "You've been busy," she observed. "It needed to be done," I said. She held up the thermal bag. "I thought you might not have eaten." "It's just tea and some chicken soup. From a can, I'm afraid, but it's hot." The gesture was so simple, so undramatic that it nearly undid me. My eyes stung, but I blinked the sensation away. "Thank you, Gladys. That is very kind." "May I come in?" I stepped aside. "It's cleaner than it was." She walked into the living room, her sharp eyes taking in the vacuum lines on the rug, the cleared surfaces, the open windows. "You've done a remarkable job already, but you shouldn't be doing it alone. I can help." "You've done enough," I said, my voice firm. "The pictures, the statement, that was the crucial help. This," I gestured at the remaining clutter, "is just manual labor. I prefer to do it myself." She nodded, understanding. She placed the thermal bag on the clean coffee table. "At least let me pour the tea. You sit for 5 minutes." I was too tired to argue. I sank into the armchair, the one no stranger had sat in. Gladys opened the bag and took out a thermos and a bowl with a lid. She poured steaming tea into a cup and handed it to me. The warmth seeped into my hands. She sat on the edge of the sofa. "The whole street was watching, you know, after the police cars left. A lot of curtains twitching." "I imagine so. Most of them don't know the particulars. They just saw the party last night and the police this morning. There will be gossip." I took a sip of the tea. It was strong, with a bit of honey. "Let them gossip. The facts are on file at the precinct if anyone is truly curious." She gave a small, approving smile. "That's the spirit. Are you staying here tonight?" The question made me look around. The house was clean enough, but it felt like a crime scene that had been tidied, not a home. Yet the idea of returning to my sparse apartment felt like a retreat. This was the battleground. I had won it. I should occupy it. "Yes," I said, "I will." "Good, that's the right decision. Shall I stay for a little while?" I looked at this elderly woman, a near stranger a week ago, who had become my only ally. Her presence was not an intrusion, but I found I wanted the solitude more. I needed to feel the empty space on my own terms. "Thank you, but I think I need to be alone now, to settle in." She didn't seem offended. She stood up. "Of course. I'm just across the street. My number is in your phone. Call for any reason at any hour." "I will, and Gladys, thank you for seeing what was happening, for calling." She patted my shoulder once, a quick, dry touch. Someone had to. She let herself out. I listened as her footsteps receded down the walk. I finished the tea and ate the soup. It was salty and bland, exactly what I needed. As dusk fell, I walked through each room, turning on lights. I checked every lock. I went to my bedroom, stripped the bed of the old linens, and put on fresh sheets from the hall closet. The familiar scent of lavender from the detergent was a comfort. I took a long, hot shower in my own bathroom, washing the day's grime and tension from my skin. Wrapped in my robe, I stood at the top of the stairs. The house below was quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of lamplight. It was still my house, but it was different. The silence was no longer accusing. It was simply silence. Mine. I had reclaimed it not just from the party, but from the expectations that had filled it for years. The echoes of their laughter were gone, replaced by the steady, quiet hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the walls. It was enough. I went to bed, and for the first time in many months, I slept through the night. I woke with the sun. The deep, unbroken sleep left me disoriented for a moment. I was in my own bed, in my own room. The previous day rushed back, but the sharp edges had been blunted by rest. It was no longer a crisis. It was a situation to be managed. I got up, made the bed, and dressed in work clothes. There was more cleaning to do, but first there were practical matters. I had left my phone charging in the kitchen overnight. When I picked it up, the screen showed 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. The notifications had begun around midnight and continued into the early hours. I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. I opened the text messages first. The first was from Malcolm, sent at 11:47 p.m. "Mom, we need to talk. You're taking this too far. Call me." The next, from my brother Robert at 12:15 a.m. "Ellie, what you did today was unforgivable. You humiliated your own son in front of everyone. You need to apologize. Lisa at 12:30 a.m. "You're a bitter, lonely woman. I hope that house feels empty." Then a series from Malcolm as the night wore on, the tone shifting. "Seriously, call me. Where am I supposed to go? You're really going to ignore me? 2. Fine, be that way." The last text from him was at 3:17 a.m. "I'm sorry about the party. It was stupid. Can we please talk?" There were others from cousins, a few family friends who must have heard a distorted version of events, expressing concern and urging reconciliation. I read each one. I felt a distant ping with each message, like hearing raindrops hit a roof far away. The anger in some, the guilt tripping in others, the pathetic plea in Malcolm's final text. They were all variations on a familiar theme. My job was to absorb their emotional weather and make it sunny again. I had resigned from that position. I did not respond to any of them. I selected all the messages and deleted them. Then I opened the voicemail. There were 5. I listened to them on speaker while I washed my breakfast dish. Robert's voice tight with anger. "Eleanor, pick up. This is ridiculous. You've made your point. Now act like an adult and call your son. He's devastated." Lisa, shrill. "You won't get away with this. Everyone sees you for what you are now, a spiteful witch." Malcolm's first voicemail was defiant. "I can't believe you did this. After everything I've done for you, all the times I was there for you, you're cutting me off over a party? Unreal." His second was quieter, pleading. "Mom, please, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd find out. It was just a joke, a stupid joke. Please call me back." The last was from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was my niece, Jessica. "Aunt Eleanor, hi. I just heard about what happened. I'm sure Mal didn't mean it. Maybe you guys could, talk it out? Family is important, you know?" I deleted each message after listening. The act of deletion was a conscious one. I was not ignoring them. I was processing and discarding. Their words required a response, an engagement, a defense. I offered none. My first call of the day was to a locksmith. I gave my address and explained I needed all exterior locks rekeyed immediately. They said they could be there by 10. My next call was to the property management company for Malcolm's apartment. I identified myself as the co-signer on the lease. I informed them I was withdrawing my financial guarantee effective immediately and that the tenant, Malcolm Richards, would need to qualify for the lease on his own income within 30 days or vacate. The woman on the phone was polite and procedural. She noted the file and said she would send the formal notice. My third call was to my mobile phone carrier. I removed Malcolm's line from my family plan. I paid the final prorated amount and disconnected the service. The representative asked if I wanted to notify the other line. I said no. Each call was a transaction. Each one severed a tether of responsibility I had carried for years. With each completed call, I felt lighter, and the house around me felt more solidly mine. The locksmith arrived promptly at 10, a man in his 60s with calm hands. I showed him the front door, the back door, and the basement bulkhead. He worked efficiently. The rasp of files, the click of new mechanisms. Within an hour, he handed me 5 new keys on a ring. "All set," he said. "The old keys won't work at all." I paid him and locked the door behind him. I tested each lock. The deadbolt on the front door slid home with a smooth, heavy finality. The sound was definitive. My phone buzzed on the table. Another text from Malcolm. "My phone service just got cut off. What is wrong with you?" I put the phone down. I walked to the living room window. The street was quiet. Gladys's curtains were open. I saw her moving in her kitchen. She did not wave, did not intrude. She was simply there, a quiet sentinel of normalcy. I returned to the kitchen. I picked up the phone and typed a single message, not to Malcolm, but to Robert, Lisa, and the few others who had sent angry texts. It was the same message to each. "I will not be responding to further messages regarding yesterday's events. Any communication must be in writing, through my attorney. The matter is closed." I did not have an attorney, but the statement served its purpose. It was a wall. It was a boundary made of words. I placed the phone back on the table, screen down. The house was silent again, but now the silence was protected by new steel in the doors and new resolve in my own mind. The messages in the dark had been heard, and they had been answered with action, not argument. The reckoning was no longer something they dictated. It was something I controlled. The silence held for 2 days. I kept busy. I finished deep cleaning every room, polishing the wood until it shone, shampooing the rugs. I rearranged some furniture, not to erase memories, but to claim the space in a new configuration. The house began to smell of citrus and beeswax instead of regret. I did not answer the phone, which continued to buzz intermittently with messages I did not read. On the 3rd afternoon, I was in the kitchen preparing a simple lunch when the doorbell rang. I knew it wasn't Gladys. She would have called first. I walked to the front window and looked out. Malcolm's car was at the curb. He stood on the porch, alone. He was dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, his hair uncombed. He looked like the boy who had come home after failing a test, not the man who had hosted a rebellion. I did not open the door. I stood where he could see me through the screen door's mesh. We looked at each other through the wire grid. "Mom," he said. His voice was muffled. "What do you want, Malcolm?" "To talk, please. Just let me in to talk." "I will not let you in. You can speak from there." He flinched, as if the refusal was a physical slap. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Can you at least open the screen? So we don't have to yell?" I considered. I turned the latch and pushed the screen door open about 6 inches. It was still hooked to the security chain I had installed the day before. The opening was symbolic, not an invitation. "Talk." He took a step closer, his face near the gap. I could see the dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. The party, it was stupid. Lisa and everyone, they were going on about how you were so controlling and how we never got to have fun here. They made the banner as a joke. I didn't think you'd ever know." I listened. His words were a rehearsed apology, focusing on the party as an isolated event, an error in judgment. He was not addressing the foundational betrayal. "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It was a declaration. You celebrated my absence in the home I provided. You allowed strangers to treat my belongings with disrespect. You did not make a mistake. You made a choice." He swallowed hard. "I know. It was a bad choice. I see that now. But to call the police, to cut off my phone, to kick me out of my apartment, that's extreme. You're treating me like a criminal." "You committed a crime," I stated. "Trespassing. You face the consequences. The other actions are the natural result of your choices. You are 22. You have a job. You can pay for your own phone and your own apartment. I am no longer subsidizing your life." "You're my mother." The words burst out, plaintive and raw. Yes, and for 22 years, that has meant I provided, I supported, I forgave. I set myself on fire to keep you warm. You responded by throwing a party on the ashes. The role is retired. He stared at me, his eyes glistening. So that's it? You're done? You're just cutting me out of your life? No, I said. The word made him blink in surprise. I am changing the terms of our relationship. The old terms were destructive to me. They are null and void. What are the new terms? He asked, a hint of his old defiance creeping in. First, I said, my voice cool and clear, there will be no contact for a period of 6 months. No calls, no texts, no visits. You will not attempt to communicate with me through other family members. This is a cooling off period for both of us. 6 months? You can't be serious. I am perfectly serious. Second, during that time, you will seek professional therapy. You will find a therapist and attend weekly sessions. You will need to understand why you felt entitled to what was mine and why you believe public humiliation was an appropriate response to your perceived constraints. His mouth hung open. Therapy? I don't need therapy. I need my mom to stop being so crazy. The third term, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, is that after 6 months, if you have engaged consistently in therapy, we may discuss the possibility of limited supervised contact. That contact will not involve financial support of any kind. It will not involve access to this house. It will be based on mutual respect, or it will not exist at all. The full scope of the ultimatum settled over him. The tears that had been gathering spilled over. You're punishing me forever, for one stupid party. This is not about punishment, I said, and for the first time my own voice tightened with emotion I had to force down. This is about survival. My survival. I have spent a lifetime being the foundation for this family. You took a sledgehammer to that foundation. I am not obligated to stand in the rubble and let you keep swinging. I am rebuilding. You are not welcome on the construction site until you have done the hard work of understanding why you became a demolition crew. He was crying openly now, silent tears streaking his face. He looked young and broken. A part of me, the mother part that had soothed every scrape and heartache, ached to reach out. But that part had been exploited into exhaustion. I kept my hands at my sides. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. That is what the therapy is for, I said. I cannot guide you. My guidance is now seen as control. You must find your own way. Those are my terms. They are not negotiable. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, a childish gesture. And if I don't agree, then you have made your choice. The separation will be permanent. We stood there, separated by the chain and the 6-inch gap. The gulf between us felt continental. He finally nodded, a small, defeated motion. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll try. The therapy, the no contact. Good, I said. There was no triumph in the word, only a weary finality. I will wait for 6 months. Do not contact me before then. I closed the screen door. The latch clicked. I stepped back from the window. I watched him stand there for a full minute staring at the door. Then he turned, walked slowly to his car, and drove away. I remained in the foyer, my heart pounding. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Holding that boundary with my weeping son required more strength than facing the police or cleaning the wreckage, but I had done it. The emotional confrontation was over. I had stated my price for peace, and he had, however, reluctantly accepted it. I walked into the clean, quiet living room and sat down. The house held me. It was enough. A week passed. The silence was no longer an absence. It was a presence, a choice. I woke each morning with a sense of purpose that belonged only to me. I finished the last of the deep cleaning, removing every trace of the party. The coffee table was polished to a high shine, the faint ghosts of the rings barely visible unless you knew where to look. I considered that appropriate. On Friday evening, I called Gladys. Would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? Something simple. Her response was immediate. I would be delighted. What can I bring? Just yourself. I spent Saturday preparing. I went to the farmer's market in the morning, buying fresh vegetables, a loaf of crusty bread, a small chicken. The act of selecting ingredients for a meal that was not a holiday, not an obligation, but a simple offering of companionship, felt novel and good. I returned home and moved through my kitchen with efficiency. I roasted the chicken with herbs from the small pot on the windowsill. I made a salad. I set the dining room table with 2 places, using my everyday dishes. I did not use the good china. This was not a ceremony, it was a meal. At 6 o'clock, Gladys arrived. She wore a simple dress and carried a small bunch of sunflowers from her garden. "For the table," she said. "Thank you. They're perfect." I took the flowers, put them in a vase with water, and placed them in the center of the table. The yellow blooms against the dark wood were a bright, uncomplicated joy. I served the food. We sat down. For a while, we ate in comfortable quiet. The only sounds were the clink of cutlery and the soft background hum of the house. "The chicken is excellent," Gladys said. "Thank you. It's a simple recipe." Simple is often best. I nodded. We continued eating. The conversation that arose was easy, meandering. We talked about her garden, a book she was reading, the new bakery that had opened downtown. We did not talk about my family. We did not talk about the police. We talked about the small, present details of a life being lived. After dinner, we cleared the plates together. I made tea. We moved to the living room, sitting in the armchairs that faced the now clean windows. The evening light was fading, painting the room in soft blues and grays. "The house feels different," Gladys observed, not looking at me but sipping her tea. "It is different," I said. "It's mine, truly mine for the first time in a long while." "You've done a remarkable thing, Eleanor. Not many people could have done it." I considered her words. I didn't feel remarkable. I felt desperate, and then I felt determined. The rest was just procedure. She smiled. "Procedure is underrated. It gets things done." We lapsed into silence again. It was a full, companionable silence. I looked around the room. My books were straight on their shelves. The rug was clean. The air smelled of roasted chicken and tea. There was no tension in the walls, no echo of resentful laughter. The space was neutral, waiting to be filled with whatever I chose. At that moment, I chose quiet. "What will you do now?" Gladys asked, her tone gentle, curious, not pressing. "I will live here," I said. The answer was simple because it was complete. I will go to work. I will tend the garden. I will read books in this chair. I will have quiet dinners with a friend. I will wait 6 months and see if my son does the hard work he needs to do. And if he does not, I will continue to live here. That is the plan. It's a good plan, she said. When she left an hour later, I walked her to the door. We said goodnight. I locked the door behind her, listening to the solid sound of the new deadbolt. I washed the 2 teacups and the plates, putting everything away in its place. I turned off the downstairs lights and went upstairs. In my bedroom, I opened the window a crack to let in the cool night air. I got into bed. The sheets were clean. The house was still. I lay there, not sleeping immediately, but listening. I heard the faint sigh of the wind in the trees. I heard the distant, muffled sound of a car on another street. I heard the steady, reliable tick of the old clock on my dresser. I thought about the banner, now ash in a landfill. I thought about the police report in a filing cabinet. I thought about Malcolm's tears on the porch. I felt the weight of those things, but they were not crushing me. They were facts in my history. They were not the definition of my present. My present was a quiet house, a paid-off mortgage, a body tired from honest work, a mind no longer scrambling to anticipate the needs and moods of others. The freedom they had mockingly celebrated was now my daily reality. But my freedom had nothing to do with their absence. It had to do with my presence, my choice, my terms. A feeling spread through my chest, warm and slow. It was not euphoria. It was not triumph. It was contentment. It was the deep, solid satisfaction of a door closed and locked, of a boundary firmly drawn, of a self reclaimed from the wreckage. I turned onto my side. Outside, a breeze rustled the leaves. In the dark, I smiled. It was a small, private smile for no one to see. It was my smile, in my house, on my Freedom Day.